Attention all you rule breakers, you misfits and troublemakers, all you free spirits and pioneers, all you visionaries and nonconformists. Everything the establishment has told you is wrong with you is actually what's right with you. You see things others don't. You are hardwired to change the world.
Hello, and welcome to the Spiritual Activist Radio Show once again. I'm glad you're tuning in because we have a really good show for you tonight. And if you haven't really listened to Timothy Freke, he is an amazing person. I don't know how he can do it, but he can get people to laugh about things that usually start picking up rifles and shooting each other over. And in today's world, I think we better start rethinking the way we've been believing about our place in the universe, the gods that we believe in, and how we look at each other. Because if we want to live on this planet and stop destroying ourselves, we need a better vision, a better way to look at life, to look at each other, and our responsibility here. Because we don't have dominion over this planet like we've been told. We're part of this planet, and we have a responsibility here to all the other living beings, including each other. And we have not taken that responsibility serious enough, and it shows in our world. Our world is on the verge of collapse on every level. Financial, governments, environment, everything is reaching its peak right now. And I think people like Timothy are out there trying to really peer into the future and see, is there a better way to go? Should we just be believing without evidence? Maybe it's time for a little bit of rational thought and love and compassion and reaching out to each other. Now remember that the Spiritual Activist Radio Show is a nonprofit, so if you want to make a donation, you feel free to make a donation. You can click on the link right here on the BBS radio show, or you can contact me at Rahasya, RAHASYA @USA.com for any comments, and be sure to visit our website too. I have a magazine called The Lotus Guide, and let's listen to what Timothy has to say now. So, hello, Tim. It's been a while since we've talked. So, what you been up to?
It's been full on, my friend. I've been writing, I've been talking, I've been running retreats. I think my most recent book, Soul Story, is my most significant that I've written. I've written a lot of books now, but this one is the one, I think. So I'm very, committed to sharing the ideas in it and just talking to people and sharing this deep awake state.
Yep. So how long's it been since you've been here to Chico? It's been about...
I have got no idea. A long time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's been like 5 years or something.
It must be more than that, I would think. I've just been to California, though. I've just spoke at the Science and Non-Duality Conference in San Jose.
Yeah.
As well as which was fantastic.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see you again. The next time you're around, I'll try to keep up with your schedule,
Yeah, I hope to come back. I mean, I hope to come to the next conference and do another retreat in California. I love California. Who couldn't love California?
So you do realize that everything, I get this from you, everything that's happened in the universe has happened for this moment. You want to dive into that?
Yeah, well, I've been developing, my work. Well, I think when we first connected, a lot of my stuff was, I was making a transition out of writing books about history. So primarily around the history of religion and how we could understand religion now, into developing a new approach to awakening. And then I've been doing that for a long time and sharing that all over the world. And the final phase of that, which is what I've entered now, was to say, okay, so there's the practice of awakening, so you can get the experience. But then we're back into life. And what is this thing we're in? Now, obviously, it's a huge mystery, and no one's ever going to come up with the answer. But we need the deepest understanding we can find. And so as a philosopher, I've set off in my latest book, Soul Story, which I've got a copy of it right here. This tome has been my attempt to develop a new philosophy. I call it an emergent spirituality, which can help us understand the universe in a new way, which brings science and spirituality together, but without asking both to change, but keeping the essence of both. And what you've just mentioned is probably the foundation of it. That the foundation is a new look at the nature of time. And we can, go straight into that because it's kind of, I love it. Because time, in spirituality, time often gets dismissed as if it's some sort of an illusion. But when I look at this moment, what I see is time. What I see is a flow of experiences, a process. And processes are made of time. So the conclusion I'm forced to is that time is actually fundamental to the nature of reality. And I feel we've misunderstood time because we have the wrong analogy. The analogy in English is that time passes. So we feel as if we're losing time. Everything's passing. We're bereft of it's all gone and we don't know what's going to happen. And we're just stuck in this moment with time rushing through. And my sense is that's not right. Because it seems to me a better analogy is not that time passes, but that time accumulates. By which I mean there's just more past now than when we first met. There's more past now than when we started this conversation. And that every moment there is more past. And this is the thing which I think you were mentioning when we started this conversation. It seems to me the past hasn't gone anywhere. It seems to me the past is implicitly present in the moment because everything that's ever happened is what's led to this moment. If there was anything in the past that was different, it wouldn't be this moment. So implicit in this moment is you and I first meeting in Chico all those years ago, you inviting me to have this conversation, us learning to speak English, the evolution of the human body, everything is implicit in this moment. So here's my shorthand description of what I think this moment is in the nature of time. It seems to me that the present is the coexistence of the past and the possible. Everything that has been meeting everything that could be. And that's what the present moment is, which is why every moment that you've ever experienced, I suspect, like mine, every new moment is always a new possibility that's never been realized before, and it includes everything that happened. And that's the nature of the moment. And that feels to me the foundation from which we can come to an understanding of the nature of reality.
So if that's the case, Tim, do you think this moment is leading to everything that ever will be, as if there is an omega point?
I'm not sure that. I think it's more creative than there being a destination. It's not, I don't think it's like it's just unfolding mechanically. That's one of the things I don't like about the standard view of time. The standard view always feels like train tracks. The past is gone, disappears behind us. The future is laid out, determined by physics or karma or something, depending on whether you're a scientist or a mystic. My feeling is that the future is not formed. It's creative. So it's full of possibilities. So this moment contains everything that's happened before and the possibility for everything that could happen. But what can happen next must include everything that has happened. And that's why that every moment does. But we are engaged in the universe as a creative process to reach to the deepest omega point. We get to play a role in where this is going because it is fundamentally a creative enterprise which has reached this, and we are consciously creative within it.
Well, that sure lays the responsibility smack dab on every individual if that's the case. And I think that's something that, as most religions like to try to get out of, is the personal responsibility sometimes, just say, well, it's just karma, or it's meant to be, or God works in mysterious ways. But I think as we wake up to a new level of consciousness, we're going to start seeing that we can enter into this matrix, this holographic reality that we find ourselves part of. And I think if this is a holographic connection, I don't know how you feel about this, but a lot of scientists like Professor Gates, they're finding equations at the very base of nature that match the very equations that keeps our internet intact and going in a direct response to what we transmit and what we receive, keeps it the same. These equations are the same. So if this is a holographic universe that we live in, and I'm a holographic projection, every little change I make in myself feeds back up into the holographic image and feeds back down to everybody else in the tiniest minute of changes. So that means that every one of us really can make a difference. And every one of us has a responsibility for our negative thoughts, our deeds, everything. How do you feel about that?
Well, I certainly feel we're responsible for what we do, and you know, in a way. I mean, I also feel we need to be very forgiving of ourselves and others, because human life is not easy, and we're evolving, and part of evolving is constantly getting things wrong. But I do think we have choice, and that's probably the most important thing about us. I'm not sure about the other stuff. I think we have to be very careful. What science does seem to have shown us is that the reality we're experiencing is how we experience reality, but not reality itself. And that what's beyond my and your experience of this three-dimensional solid world is not solid, it's information. Now, I think that is beginning to look very established, so that we can see the whole evolutionary process of the universe over 13.8 billion years as the evolution of information, which we experience like this. Now, that works very well with the idea of a holographic metaphor. It also works quite well with a computer metaphor, but it's very, very important to recognize that these are metaphors. That what human beings have always done is taken the latest technology and made it a metaphor. So in the time of Newton, the universe was a big machine. It's not a big machine. It's the universe. But we just invented machines. Now we've invented holograms, we've invented the internet, and so now it's all, you know, we're in a computer simulation. We're not. And there's no evidence to suggest that actually. What we're in is something much richer than that, which has given birth to these images, or with which we can understand it. So we need to be careful how we interpret it, because otherwise we can end up really thinking we're in the Matrix. Now, I love the film The Matrix, but we're not in the Matrix. It doesn't seem to me. We're in something much more interesting than that. That's a fantasy film. It's not science. Same with the hologram. You know, we need to be careful that we don't suddenly take the image and go, oh, that means therefore, you know, I contain the universe within me and my body and things like that, which because holographic fragments contain the whole hologram. Now, that may turn out to be true, but I don't see the evidence for it right now. So what I prefer to do is go, look, let's actually look what science has shown us without speculating too much about, well, it's okay to speculate, but to be careful in the way we do that. And it's already interesting enough. So we're in an evolving process, 13.8 billion years of evolving information. And the essential thing that I want to explore in my new philosophy is that through that evolution of information, the accumulation over time of the past, of more and more information, there has been an evolutionary process. And that's meant that new creative things have constantly emerged. So there was a time when there was pretty much hydrogen. And we've gone from hydrogen to you and me having this conversation. And that's incredible, isn't it? You know, to slightly, the amazing evolutionist Brian Swin, what we've learned is that if you take hydrogen and leave it long enough, it learns to do philosophy. I mean, that's phenomenal, isn't it? That's what we've learned. So what I'm wanting to add to this story is that it's fairly established now that for the first 10 billion years the universe was in existence, we saw the evolution of matter and the galaxies. And then for the last 3 billion years, we've seen the evolution of life from very simple forms into more complex forms, and then into sentience, into this experience of sensation, consciousness. And then finally, this other element has evolved. of psyche, the experience you and I are having now of an immaterial realm made of images, the place where we can have this conversation, which is, it's quite extraordinary. The word psyche is the Greek word for soul. So we could say that what's happened is we've gone from matter, some basic information as matter, has evolved into information as soul, which is not made of matter. It's actually made of images. It's immaterial. And the big addition I want to make to the story is that what science tends to do is go, all right, we've had the material universe evolve, we've had the biological universe evolve, and then there's psyche, which is a kind of side effect of the brain. We don't really know how, but that's all it is. What I want to suggest is that actually psyche or soul is a whole domain, it's a whole dimension of reality, which has emerged from the biological dimension, just like biology has arisen from the physical dimension. And that domain is the one that spirituality has been exploring, and I've been exploring it all my life. I'm sure you have too. Many people listening to this will have. That's the domain you can go off to in meditation. It's the domain you can explore on ayahuasca or shamanic journeying. It's the realm in which you fight with your demons and evolve as a persona, as a person. And it's the realm you go to when you die. It's the realm which is there. Now, so it seems to me that we've been through these three phases of evolution: physics, biology, and then soul, not as a byproduct, but as an actual emergent reality. So that's what I'm asking science to do. But that means I need to ask spirituality to do something as well, because what spirituality traditionally says is that, yes, there is a realm of soul, of course, for spirituality, and it's the most real thing, but it exists before the universe, and we've fallen from it. We're souls, and we've fallen from this dimension of soul into matter, where we are trapped in this awful business of life, and we need to get free. My feeling is that's a very negative view of life, an old-fashioned view, which we need to leave behind now. So what I want to say to spirituality is, what about this? What if we haven't fallen from soul, but everything has evolved, everything, including the soul dimension that we experience and after death, and that we have one flow of evolving reality which has led to this?
So, if that is even close to being the case, that seems to give me the idea that this universe, call it God or Great Spirit or energy or whatever, is attempting to evolve on many, many levels of frequencies, simply to be able to look back at itself and observe the universe. And if that's the case, I know in the Bible it says all the souls were created in the beginning, but I question that. It seems like that might not be true. There might be spirit as the ocean, but souls as little droplets forming. It seems like there's some kind of a beginning that I can sense in myself that goes beyond this life, but it doesn't necessarily go back to the inappropriately called the Big Bang. It doesn't go back to that beginning. It goes back to this other beginning that might have been a couple of lives ago or a few lives ago, but it seems like we're creating souls as we go. And I mean, that just dives me off into the mystery even more. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think so. I think here's the essential idea. Let's go back to where we started with time. The essential thing, where's the universe come from? Well, what can we say? We can, people say all sorts of stuff, but what can we genuinely say without inventing God at the beginning, where, taking some super being and just going, oh, he's just there? We don't know that. So what can we really say? Well, surely we can at least say this. The universe has come from the potentiality for the universe. So what I suggest is that what I call the possible, which is arising as this flow of time, the accumulation of the past, is the potentiality for everything. There is a formless potentiality. Now, I think that's what, in some ways, was meant by Brahmin a niguna in the Hindu tradition, which is Brahman without any qualities. Pure potentiality, no qualities, just being. Not conscious, not anything, just pure being, but the potential to be everything, but just pure being. And that pure being is arising as all form, as all this information. And it's coming into form, and it's starting in the most primitive ways. And then as the past accumulates, it's becoming deeper and richer and deeper and richer. So you're starting with very simple forms, but once you've got hydrogen and then you've got oxygen, you can bring them together and you can have water. Once you've got water and carbon, you can have life. Once you've got life, you can have sentience. Once you've got experience of looking at a table, you can have the idea of a table. Now you've got psyche. Now you've got soul. So you've got this emergent, so that all form is the realization of deeper and deeper potentialities arising from spirit. Now, if you get that, then you can say, look, spirit, or whatever you want to call that, you can call it what you like, but let's call it being or spirit. That is realizing itself as everything that is. But you could also say subjectively, it's experiencing itself as everything that is. And this is what I think you were saying, my friend. It is experiencing itself through everything, because it is the essence which is arising as everything. So it's experiencing itself as you and me. So as Tim, I'm this separate body and soul, but my deepest being is the formless oneness from which everything is coming. And the great awakening, which I've been exploring for decades now, is how you can pay attention to that and wake up to this formless oneness, which is what you really are. When that happens, it seems that the one, the potentiality, the spirit, is conscious of itself through me or through you. So that it's not only experiencing itself as all of these forms, it also knows itself as the formless oneness. And that's where it feels like, spiritual awakening is actually the cutting edge now of the evolutionary process. Because the process has taken us from this unconscious oneness of primal spirit through this ever-increasing levels of individuation and greater consciousness, until it's reached you and I, where it's very individuated and very conscious, through which it can now not only be conscious of all the experiences it's having, it can be conscious that it is and know itself. So you've gone from unconscious oneness through conscious individuality, and then through that to conscious oneness. And that feels like the omega that is opening out for us. When you talk about the omega point, that's the point which is pulling us. And I think that's what Teilhard de Chardin, for instance, who talked about the omega point, was really getting at. He called that the Christ, but I think we can call it whatever we like, that there is this conscious oneness towards which we are moving.
Yeah, and if you stop and think about this, Tim, as it is above, so it is below. If there's any truth to that, I think of myself and my birth. What did it take for me to be born? Now, I'm comparing this to Brahma. What it took for me to be born was different levels of materiality, subatomic particles making atoms, atoms making cells, cells making molecules, molecules making sperm and egg, and sperm and egg coming together and dividing and making me. Now, when I was first born, I didn't have the neural networking for self-awareness or too much of any kind of awareness at all. It took a while for that networking to evolve. And as it evolved, I reached into my adolescence, my young adulthood. Now here I am today at this level of realizing that most everything I've done wasn't that important, but it was part of the path to get me to where I am, to awakening. And it seems like that's the same case with Brahma. If Brahma would have woke up out of his 100-year Brahma sleep, and as he first awoke, maybe he didn't have the self-awareness or even awareness at all. And here's where the grand mystery comes in. Maybe there is a implicit networking of a pattern that opens up through even Brahma would be waking up to his own mystery and slowly becoming conscious and self-aware. And here he is today in the multiplicity of all of these galaxies and beings all over the universe, starting to wake up to its own divinity. And maybe at the very end, we get back to where we started, except totally self aware through every single atom, molecule, cell, being, planet, sun, everything. And who knows what might happen then. I think they say that it's an oscillating universe, and Brahma goes back to sleep for a while, but it's interesting that we follow that same pattern as an individual also.
Yes, there's at the end of my book, I compare the universe in similar way to an unfolding from a seed or from an embryo, and I think, and my suspicion is, I mean, obviously we're speculating philosophically now or metaphysically, but my own gut feeling, which can't be any more than that, is that what pre-existed the Big Bang, the moment zero, the beginning of our universe, was not nothing, was not just potentiality, but which is actually previous universes, and that everything is always arising from the past and the possible, always. And that I don't personally resonate too much now with the old Hindu model, because I think the whole cyclic thing, that Hinduism is not very enamored of life. Most old forms of spirituality, nearly all of them, are fundamentally anti-life, because they see life as a fallen state, which we need to get away from. And, that was a progressive idea 3,000 years ago. But this was done by people who thought the world was flat. We've learned a lot since then. And whilst I respect the past, and I'm very grateful to them for all they did, and God knows they made huge breakthroughs and said things which I still find inspiring. But I do think we need to move on. So I'm not sure we need to see it as a big cycle, but I think it's actually a continual progression of ever greater emergence that we're in. And what you said about the idea, look, you yourself, the body comes in and then becomes conscious, does seem to be what the universe has done. It's come in and it's become conscious. And the idea at the end of my book on emergent spirituality in Soul Story is very much that, is that this hasn't come from God in the sense if we use the word God here in a particular way, because it's a dangerous word, if we use it to mean a conscious being of love, that conscious oneness, spirit knowing itself, my feeling is that's not where it starts. That's where it ends, or that's where it's going. That's not where it's come from. There's so many problems. The reason that God has become quite unpopular amongst many thinking people is that if you put God at the beginning of time, that God is not very nice, it seems to me, because there is so much suffering in the world, and evolution has been so crazy. It's just been bizarre. I mean, there's been 5 complete extinctions. There were 120 million years of dinosaurs. I mean, it's this God. If God's planning, if there's an intelligent design, he's not that intelligent. It's kind of crazy what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's mean. It's crazy and mean. This God is crazy and mean. So I feel like an old Gnostic now. That's what the Gnostics thought about the Creator God. They looked at life and went, well, this place is horrible. So anyone who created this is crazy and mean. And that's how they dismiss God. My feeling is, yes, if you put God at the beginning of time, he's crazy and mean. But maybe God isn't at the beginning of time. Maybe God is the being of oneness and love to which this is going, because the deepest things always emerge last. It didn't start with soul. It didn't start with us having this conversation. It started with hydrogen. It took a long time to get to this. So the deepest things come last. Well, maybe, and I think this is what you might have been saying, maybe the deepest thing of all is this arising of conscious oneness, conscious spirit, which is this being of love. And my suspicion is that it is just as my body is a communion of cells all working together to form something greater than themselves, so that what we could call God, transcendent spirit, is a communion of souls. And that when we come into communion with the oneness, when we wake up and we experience that enormous love, we are bringing transcendent spirit into existence. So we are actually playing a role, if you will, in the evolution or in creation of God.
Yeah, you know what, Tim? Sometimes when I think of this subject, it gives me a really haunting feeling in my gut, because I have the feeling that as we awaken to the mystery, we're not going to figure it out. We're going to realize that there is such a thing as an eternal mystery that we are part of. I have the feeling that there's something underlying the very fabric of everything that we're saying and talking about, everything that is a mystery. And that can be
I'm so
a
pleased.
daunting
I'm
thought.
so pleased you did. Yeah, no, I mean, because normally when I talk, I always start with mystery, and I want to end with it always as well, because look, all of this is ideas. I think ideas are important, but fundamentally there's this breathtaking mystery of existence, and that's where it begins and that's where it ends, and then the words are the journey through. And one of the ways of understanding why that's true, I think, is what we've just said, is that I don't think I can know what it's like to be God, which is the whole thing. I can't know what any more than a cell in my finger can know what it's like to be Tim. What I can know is what it's like to commune in God. And that's to commune in the mystery, to commune in something greater than me, which I cannot comprehend, but which I know experientially, and I know it as love. This profound sense of oneness feels like love. So my sense is, yes, you're exactly right, that all of these words eventually point to something greater than words. And that's the realization that happens when you experience awakening. And what arises from that is this profound sense of communion and oneness and love in the body.
Tim, what do you mean by deep awakening?
To me, that's a phrase which I've coined to really stand for the traditional idea of spiritual awakening. But because I have an evolutionary perspective, I feel our understanding of spirituality must keep going forward. So I want to frame a new language which allows us to think these ideas in a new way and get them experientially. So for me, deep awake is being awake, like we are now, but conscious of the depths of our being. And the minute you do that, you enter this paradoxical state in which I'm experiencing myself as a body and a soul, and then I reflect back onto the experiencer, and I am this vast stillness.
Yep.
This huge empty stillness, which is one with everything. And they're both true. And so that emptiness is experiencing itself through Tim. And I'm both of those. And that's deep awake.
Yep. That's also lucid living, huh?
Yes, same idea. When I was with you, I was using that analogy because it's like a dream then. You see, there's forms, and then there's this presence within which the forms are arising, like a dream arises within awareness. So that's why you get the analogy, which is the old ancient analogy of this is the dream of Brahman, it's a dream of Brahman, it's a dream of God. Because you get, I see. Although now I would say slightly differently. It's the same thing, but I'd say it differently. I'd say it's not that there's a dream of God, it's that God is infinite dreams. So God is dreaming the dream of Tim, and your dream of you, and the dream of being the plant in my office, and the dream of being the whole universe. It's like it's all of these. It's conscious through all of the individuated forms that make up everything. So that all of that together is this unfolding process of evolution. And the lucid living is like a lucid dreaming, is when you throw your attention back onto your deep being and find that you are the space within which everything's happening. So you're in it, and it's in you, like a dream. Both, not one or the other, both.
Sometimes, Tim, when you're thinking and talking about these kinds of things, I get this deep feeling that I would love to just scream and at the same time go into deep silence. It's a
Yeah,
paradoxical kind of a feeling, you know. So tell me a little bit
I
about.
do know.
Yeah, yeah, I bet you do. Tell me a little bit about
I
what
see.
you.
My thing.
Go ahead.
So, so I was going to say, you can see for me, my particular nature is that I find it very exciting and I'm very, it's like it deeply moves me deeply, and that's the kind of like, oh my God. And then there's also complete stillness,
Yep.
and they're just there together. That and ooh, just so I can really get the image, like waves on the sea, and then at the depths it's very still.
Yep.
And on the waves on the sea, everything's individual, all these different vibrations of information, and then right at the depths, it's all one thing, and
Yep.
it's very, very still.
Yeah, and it comes out in our
Sorry,
life.
what were you going to say?
Yeah, it comes out in our life as different metaphors, the devil and God and negative and positive. It seems like it's
Yeah,
part of our experience. So tell me what you mean about
yeah.
the dark side of science.
Well, I when I was last with you, I was writing about the dark side of religion, and trying to say, look, there's something very positive at the center of religion, which is about awakening and love and oneness, and that's great. But there's a dark side, and people can look at my old books to find out that dark side is pretty evident in the world right now. And science, I feel, is the same. On the one hand, it has achieved so much. The mere fact that we can have this conversation in two different continents is because of the incredible understanding which science has arrived at. It's just almost you can't begin to conceive of the rate of the increase in our knowledge. And there's a lot of, I like watching science programs and nature programs, and there's a great sense that the ones that it shows the wonder of the universe, and you know what it does. But there's small print, and the small print is that the universe is wonderful, but ultimately it's meaningless. It's happened just through chance. It's going nowhere apart from heat death, and you get to be here for a few years, long enough to go, what the hell's going on? And then you're gone, and that's it. So what it has is a very bleak, actually, a very bleak philosophy. Now, on my journey through life, it feels to me that life is actually not like that. Life feels magic. And when I go into the deep awake state, there is a profound conviction that what we're in is meaningful and good. And I can't throw it off. It's made such a big impression on me that what I've been looking for is, okay, how can this be meaningful and good? Because I'm pretty damn sure it is. And my philosophy is a way of taking the best bits of science and the best bits of spirituality and putting them together in a new form, which can account for the fact that on the one hand, the universe is very causal and physics works, and also it's magical and has meaning, and the soul is immortal, and we are on an incredible journey. We're in a story here, and that is also real.
Yeah, it's also good that religion has also evolved, allowing two heretics to talk like this and not be
Yeah,
condemned or burned at the stake, So I think everything is evolving somewhat, fortunately for people like us, because there was a time when this conversation would have had to been done in a very quiet, dark room between two people with nobody listening, and that time wasn't very far.
that's absolutely that's absolutely right. So, and I think that the one we need to, I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as that. Obviously, that's horrendous, and thank goodness that changed. What I see now, especially more so in the UK, I think, than in America, because America has a different history and relationship with religion. But here, in the intellectual mainstream, the scientific worldview, the mainstream scientific worldview, what I call objectivism, what really exists is the object, and the subject's just a side effect. has become so strong, not probably amongst the general population, but amongst the intellectual ideas people, that if you want to say things like, I experience life as magic and I'm convinced of the immortality of the soul, you are pretty much going to be dismissed as woo-woo, crazy, wishful thinking, not to be taken as a serious thinker. And part of my aspiration with the philosophy of emergent spirituality in my book Soul Story is to go, I want to create a philosophy which is intellectually robust, but which can actually allow us to understand these ideas like the immortality of the soul in a new way that makes them credible, so that we can stand up in those circles, like I've done, been speaking with scientists quite a bit recently, and say, look, no, this isn't woo-woo. It's just your philosophy is too narrow. And this is also intellectually credible, robust, thought through. It's not woo-woo. It's a way of understanding more of life, actually, because you're missing out a whole section of life. And so that it feels like in the evolution of culture, we've gone from irrational religion, irrational spirituality, which is religion, into rational science, which was great because it set us free to have this conversation and did away with oppressive religion for us. But the next step is to find rational spirituality. So that we go from irrational spirituality to a deeply rational spirituality, which includes, but transcends, but includes science within it. So that these two are no longer in opposition. They come into a deep harmony with each other.
I think while you were talking just then, that when you said for us, it would have been in quotes. Let's go into for us, and what do you think's happening with some of the other religions that seem to be pretty much stuck back in the Stone Age almost, and it's really causing a deep conflict on our planet? How do you approach that?
Yeah.
And we all know who we're talking about.
Yeah, with care. I mean, I think when I was last with you, I was saying things which were pretty full on and which people could have taken great offense to, and got myself in a lot of trouble. Not because I want to offend anyone, just because I'm looking for the truth. And the truth is, it seems to me that culture, like everything, is evolving, and some cultures are still going through a phase that we went through in the Middle Ages. Now, it's only parts of cultures, it's fragments. But the thing about the evolutionary process generally is that it tends to all coexist. So what reason that the evolutionary story is so compelling is that hydrogen, where it all started, is still here. There's still hydrogen. There's still basic matter doing its thing. Those levels haven't gone anywhere. They've just turned into something greater as well. There is still primitive cells, primitive biology. They still exist. There is still crocodiles. The dinosaurs are still with us. All of that is still here. But there's this as well. And we have to learn to live with that. I have to live with all the primitive levels of the universe, the level where there's just mass which attracts mass. I have to live with that. I have to live with my body, which has biological needs and gets ill and gets old and dies. I have to live with that. And in the same way, I have to live with these different levels of emergent consciousness as well. So within my own community, there are people who are very awake, and there's people who are very asleep. And there's people who are really caught up in whatever culture they happen to be born in. They're desperate for identity. They're desperate for their particular thing to be the thing, things which I hope we can grow out of. The question is, and this is a really deep question, is how we facilitate that, and without wishing to sound just completely wishful thinking, but I think it's actually the deepest answer, is we have to find the loving solution. We have to come back with love. As long as we keep coming back with force and greater power, even though sometimes we do need to we need to prevent terrible things happening, but we need to root it deeply in love. And because that's the best bit of our culture. That's the essence of ancient Christianity is love your enemies. If we were busy loving our enemies, we'd be in a very different world now than we were when 9/11 happened, for instance. So the challenge, I think, is to find new ways to respond to less emergent states, just like we do with crime, where we need to understand how people have ended up in these states, isolate them so they don't do any harm, but help them transform. Because if we just meet it with our own low-level responses by violence and anger only, then it will just it'll keep the whole thing stuck in that level.
It would really be nice if many of us would eventually start seeing how a lot of this has been politicized. I mean, to say that Christians are the KKK or the Israelis are Zionist or the Muslims are ISIS is really misleading, and it gets politicized, and it feeds this dark unconscious war machine that keeps us perpetually in this endless war because of how we've set up the military industrial complex and all of this. But I tell you, when you put light on this, and I've talked with Muslim friends, with Jewish, and they all see this. We're part of this really dark game that some aspect of our reality is involved in. And but the moment you put light on it, and I often use the analogy of the Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz, everybody's just, skipping and hopping through the wizard, and they're going to go see the wizard, but they're scared of him, because he's really this big monstrous force. But the whole movie changes when they pull back the curtain. As they pull back the curtain and see that it's just a frail old man, and that's what we're seeing in the upper realms of our politics and even religion. These are frail, scared old men that are slowly dying off, but they still have managed to infect the other generations, but not to the degree that they were infected. And I think if we can just keep putting light on this, that's the importance of books like yours and conversations like this, telling people to pull back the curtain and don't be afraid, because the moment I seen fear dissipate in myself, oh my God, I seen this adventurous spirit emerge out of myself and turn this whole thing into this amazing journey that I've been on ever since. Because to me, Tim, if love isn't the answer, if I have that wrong, I don't know really if I even want to be part of this.
I feel exactly the same. That's the ground. So there's a whole political dimension to the philosophy of emergent spirituality. And there's an emergent politics, which I haven't written about yet, but I hope to in the coming years, because it's taking shape. And the essence of it is this realization that we become conscious through individuating, but that when we have individuated, we can become conscious of our fundamental oneness, not instead of the individuation, but through it. So this is contrary to a lot of spirituality that's popular right now, which sees the individuation as in the way. I don't think that's right. I think the individuation is the means by which we become more and more conscious until we're conscious that everything is one. And that has a political undertone as well, because what's happened, particularly in Western culture, is we've really individuated. We've turned up individuality to a level that's never been witnessed before in history. And that is fantastic. We're still pretty collective. We still got a long way to go. But the more we can think for ourselves, the more we become unique individuals, the more conscious we are. And then when we're conscious enough, we can become conscious of this oneness of being. And that manifests as this universal love or compassion. And politically, I think it's the same. It's like, well, we're doing the individuality, but the problem is we're kind of stuck in the individual thing. We're fragmented. Whereas what we need to wake up to now is the underlying oneness, and that's the love. So we need to bring the underlying oneness and love to the individuality. into this individualism, which has marked our culture, not to replace it, because it's a great thing, but actually as the fruit which has arisen from it. And the great mistake that we've witnessed with political movements in the past, I'm thinking now of things which have happened like the communist revolutions that we saw in Russia and China and all of these things, was they tried to get rid of individuality and replace it by collectivism, so that it's just about the collective, get rid of the individual. Whereas that seems the same mistake as is made often in spirituality, get rid of the individual. No, enhance the individual, make the individual even more conscious, more themselves, and then through that will come this collectivization, this love as well, not instead. And if we can do that, then we can build a society in which we take care of each other, where we can reach out to each, where we're a genuine community, because we're rooted in our fundamental oneness, and that manifests as love. The culture of kindness. That's what would be possible.
Yeah, it's listening to you talk. It reminds me of the first part of my life I spent trying to be somebody, an individual, and I really wanted to be somebody so bad, and it's like I couldn't be somebody. And right at the point in my life where I looked around, I thought, oh, I really could be somebody now. I had enough going around in my life. And at that exact point, I realized that the whole point is to become nobody. And I go, oh my God, this is such a strange thing, because I've spent so much energy trying to become somebody, only to find out that the whole point is to become nobody, to become somebody else. Entirely different. Life has this weird paradoxical way of teaching you things.
Yeah, I think that's right. The only thing I want to add to that story, because it's also my story, I think it's a lot of people's story, is that you become nobody as well, not instead. You are clearly still somebody, and I love it about you. You are yourself. I am myself. I'm more myself now than I've ever been in the whole of my life. And yet I'm also nobody. I'm also aware that behind the scenes, there's just this emptiness of being, and I'm that. So they're both there. And what I think happens is, it's a bit like that wonderful thing you said earlier, where you went through the evolution of your body and then arriving and becoming conscious. And we've been on that journey, and that doesn't stop when the body arrives. It obviously goes through to the evolution of the psyche. And at a certain point in the evolution of the psyche, you've gone through adolescence, you come into life, you're a young person, you formed yourself. And then actually what happens is you wake up to something deeper than the psyche, or you can do, at which point there's this giving away of yourself. And it's kind of natural as well. You can do it on this grand spiritual level, which is lovely, but lots of people do it on a very beautiful level just by becoming parents. You suddenly find there's other beings that you are willing to sacrifice yourself for. So you're willing to do a whole lot of stuff you don't particularly want to do in order to sustain and create a better world for these other people who are not you. And you've just transcended the individuality, but it's arisen through becoming an individual. And if we can build a culture on that, where we don't stop at the individual, but we go, look, we want a culture where we care for each other. We want a culture of love. And we can do that through enhancing our conscious individuality.
Well, Tim, I know you say that time exists, but once again, you've made it disappear. So we're running out of time, unfortunately. Would you like to have some last thoughts?
Yes, I would like to invite people to join me in exploring a new spirituality. I feel very deeply this is what we need right now. And it will come into existence, like everything, through us. The next thing that needs to emerge is this form of evolutionary spirituality which embraces science but transcends and includes it, which is rational and thoughtful and can help us understand the world in that conceptual way, but which is also rooted in awakening, in stillness, and therefore in love. So if that moves you, come to my website, timfreke.com. connect with me, join the mailing list, find me on Facebook, join the Tim Freke forum on Facebook. There's loads of free videos. I'm going to do an online course. I'm going to do online questions and answers. There's a film being made. You can catch that. We need to contribute, and I'm doing my best, and I invite you to, as I'm sure many of you are, to do your best to bring into reality, to realize this deeper level which is potential now, to take the past and create something better from it together.
Sounds like a really good reason to turn off the basketball game. Okay, Tim.
Oh, there's time for basketball as well.
Thank you very much for your time, Tim.
It's been a real pleasure. Lovely to connect with you again.
Yep. Wow, it's always nice to talk to Timothy, because I tell you, he's a really sweet guy. He's out there in the world. He's looking at all the problems and all of the religious conflicts and everything that's going on in the world, and still has a positive attitude. And I think that's really important in today's world, because I get out there too and I look at all the things, and a lot of things really aren't good to look at. But somebody asked me, as really a close friend, she asked me, well, what do you mean? Like, how does this work? Because a lot of people have their head stuck in the sand and they say they're positive, but really it's just because they're not looking at the world. But there's a way to look at the world and stay positive. And I told her, I said, well, picture yourself standing on a street corner, a busy street corner, and you want to cross to the other side. Now somebody offers you a blindfold and says, it's going to be okay, just take your best shot. Or you can keep your eyes open, and yeah, the traffic's there, it looks dangerous and everything. But I prefer to take the blindfold off, take my chances, and learn how to deal with life. So again, thank you for listening in and tuning in, and be sure to come back and we'll do this again. Thank you very much. Take care.